Hey, everybody, it's Tommy Canale, and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show that tells you how they made their mark. He's an author and a journalist who has written numerous publications. He's written Eating Las Vegas and Rock and Roll Chef. He's been covering the Las Vegas dining scene since 2003, is the co-host of the Food and Loathing podcast that specializes in food and dining. He's the innovator of the Neon Feast app, which we'll talk about. He's known as the Neon Mohawk, but he eats, drinks, and tells stories. Let's welcome in Al Mancini. Al, welcome to the show.
Wow, I do a little bit of everything and absolutely nothing, it sounds like there. I love it, man. Yeah, it's great to be here, man. I'm so happy to be chatting with you, and it's going to be fun to be on this side of the microphone for a change.
Exactly, and I am a fan of your podcast. I've been listening to it since we met, and I'm a fan of it. We're going to get to it, but I'm a fan of the show.
Oh, thanks so much, man. I'm a fan of yours as well, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, let's back it up. You're a graduate of Seton Hall, and you attended Brooklyn Law School. So was that the goal originally, was to get into law?
I mean, actually, if I'm going to be honest about it, I went to undergrad communications. I was very into the rock and roll scene. I was on one of the biggest college radio station in the country during the 80s, and it was one of the biggest heavy metal stations in the country. So everything was going to be about the music industry for me. I ended up, worked for some record labels. I managed a recording studio for a little while. Suddenly, I got married, moved to Manhattan, had the highest rent of my life, and lost my job managing a recording studio. And I had no idea what I was going to do. Found a job tending bar at the legendary punk rock club CBGB, which was, cool for my soul, but no money. And like so many people, I realized that going back to school and getting student loans would be a nice way to put pause on getting, a real life. And so I went to law school with the intention of graduating law school and doing well, but with no idea whether I was ever going to want to practice. I loved law school. The practice of law was really not so much for me. And so I practiced very briefly, and suddenly I got offered a job reporting on rock and roll for ABC News Radio. And you kind of can't turn that down after like 3 years of super intense hard work at law school. And now I'm going to go out and have a little fun with some rock bands on the road and, do all the things that rock bands do. Sure, I'll do that for a little while. So I fell into journalism that way.
Okay.
And then I eventually, I won't bore you with the whole life story all in one question answer, but yeah, then eventually transitioned over to doing the food writing.
So tell me about the legendary CBGB. I want to know. I'm intrigued by this club. Tell me about it.
Look, CBGB is a fantastic club. It was the birthplace of punk rock. It was founded in the 70s. The Ramones played their first show there in the 70s. Now, let's be clear. I was not there during the glory days. I am an old man, but I am not that old of a man. So it was the 1990s that I found myself tending bar there while I went to law school during the day, tending bar at CBGB's at night. The place was not during its punk rock heyday, but still every 5 years we'd do anniversary celebrations and all these huge bands would be there. Every band wanted to play CBGB. And I wouldn't say it was a good introduction to the hospitality business for me because we were not very hospitable.
Okay.
One of the fun parts was that we treated our customers like crap if we didn't like them, even the rock star customers. I remember being very rude and getting in a fight with Evan Dando of the Lemonheads there one time and threatening to kick him out if before his appearance came on Letterman. So, it was a fun place to work. Not much for hospitality. I made very bad pizza in CBGB Pizza, which is right next door. So that has given me so much more respect for the pizza makers that I interview now, who are so good at it and treat it like an art form. And for me, it was just a way to keep drunk punk rockers from vomiting. We fed them my pizza, and it was not very good. I'll tell you that.
You're big into rock and roll. What's your favorite rock and roll band?
Oh, man, that's so hard. Overall, my big favorites over the years are everybody from like Bob Dylan and Neil Young and David Bowie, right?
Okay.
Those are the people who are just the classics. But what I really love to listen to is usually anything that's loud and obnoxious and noisy. I like noise rock. I like the no wave movement out of New York City in the late 80s and early 90s. I like punk rock. I like heavy metal. To me, rock and roll has always been an expression of frustration and anger and a way for people to healthily get that out of their system. And like, I'm a guy, I mean, I try not to be an obnoxious person, but when I get mad, my first instinct, or when I get upset, my first instinct is to yell. Some people, their first instinct is to cry, right? Now, I know that I can't yell whenever I'm upset, just like I don't like when people cry in front of me whenever they're upset. But I bring that up because that's what I want from my music. I want it to be yelling about things that it's angry about, right? And so I really like anything that's aggressive and loud, but has quality musicianship underneath it. So, you know, bands like Sonic Youth that I've seen, 25 times over the years, I really love that because it doesn't matter whether I know their songs. I could just listen to them play and I love it. Same thing for Tool, who played a whole set recently of no songs that anybody knew unless you had all their albums memorized. But, but bands like that I love because they're loud, they're aggressive, but I don't need to know the song that they're playing, right? So for me, music's a way to externalize your frustrations in life. And so I like people that are angry. I don't like people who are whiny. I don't like goth music. They cry too much for me. I want people who are yelling.
Did the passion for food come to you when you were in New York, or did it happen after you moved to Las Vegas?
I've always been passionate about food. In New York City, you learn about food. You learn about multicultural food really quickly when you're young and broke in New York City because Ethiopian food's so much more affordable. Indian food is so much more affordable. You could get entire feasts. So that's how I learned about, multicultural food, was just being broke in New York. When I went to law school, I always like to say I learned about fine dining out of spite.
Okay.
I was surrounded by a lot of people. Now, keep in mind, I attended law school from 92 to 95.
All right.
Okay. So not a big internet still yet, right? So if you wanted to learn about restaurants, you had to really go out and subscribe to magazines and do that. Well, I was around law school with a lot of people who grew up with considerably more money than I had grown up with. And we were in New York City, whereas I had grown up outside of Philadelphia, South Jersey. So these people would talk about places like Le Cirque, legendary New York restaurants, and they would just mention it in passing. Now, you mentioned my Mohawk now. I used to have super long hair when I was in law school. I had 7 piercings in one ear, 1 piercing in the other, a piercing in my nose, piercing in my lip, a piercing in my eyebrow. I had tattoos, and in the early 90s, that was not very normal. I was one of these people who always, because I looked so strange, I didn't like to be shut out of conversations because I felt people would naturally try to shut me out of conversations because I looked a little out of the norm. So when people would start talking about fine dining and I felt that I couldn't contribute or even follow along, that made me uncomfortable. And I didn't like to be in a school full of people where I was uncomfortable that I couldn't continue the conversation. Because I like to feel comfortable in every room. I like to feel comfortable among a room full of heroin addicts and among a room full of billionaires. Sometimes they're the same people, I found. But, in general, so I taught myself fine dining for that reason, so that I could be among people who had a lot more money and a lot more cultural upbringing than I had and not feel stupid, not look stupid, not sound stupid. So those were where I developed my passion. I got asked to start writing about food as an absolute goof. I think people thought it would be funny at Las Vegas City Life if they had the punk rock food critic, and that's why they hired me, and that's how I ended up doing it professionally.
So you began in Las Vegas in journalism covering strip clubs in 2001 for Las Vegas Weekly. Is that correct?
That was my first local writing gig.
Okay.
I was moved out here by ABC News Radio to continue my entertainment reporting for them so that we had boots on the ground in Las Vegas.
Gotcha.
So it was very low cost. They moved me out here at my own salary or a little slight increase, and suddenly I didn't have taxes, and the cost of living was nothing in 2001. So I loved it, but I wanted to write locally. Las Vegas is a really small town.
It is. People they don't believe that when I say that.
No, and everybody knows everybody. And if you could show them that you write for some tiny little local publication, people got really excited. Now, I was on ABC News Radio. My stories were getting heard by about 4 million people. This is in the old days when, network radio had a stranglehold. And that wasn't impressing anybody here in Vegas. So I really wanted to write locally to be part of the community so that I knew the other writers. I knew the editors of the newspapers. When we saw each other on red carpets, we were just be more friendly if we worked together. So I went to my friend Molly Brown. I know her now well, but at the time I had met her at a concert, and I said, "You work for the Weekly. I want to take you out." I took her to the Double Down Saloon, showed up an hour late because I was getting tattooed, got really drunk with her and my wife, and I said, just let me write something for you. You know, I want to get paid because I won't work for free and take a job away from another paid reporter, but you can pay me virtually nothing and I'll be fine, right? And she said, well, we got this idea. We know you and your wife go to strip clubs. You know, we had a long drunken conversation. She knew everything about me. And she said, do you want to write strip club reviews? And I was like, how would I not want to do that? That is just the coolest Las Vegas job.
Right.
It's the most Vegas thing I think I've ever done. So I did that at the Weekly, probably for just a little under a year. And somebody else, another reporter that was already on staff that wanted to be around naked women, kind of said, I'll do it for free. And they let him do it for free, which is fine. And then I got a phone call from, at that point, Las Vegas City Life. And they said, we really loved your reviews. We liked your style. We liked everything you did. We don't want strip club reviews, but we could use a restaurant critic. Do you want to do this? Do you know anything about food? And I said, well, I mean, I like to eat. I like to eat at good restaurants. So sure, who would turn down that job?
How did you then educate yourself to be able to write about all different types of cuisines?
I mean, I feel any journalist, if they have the basic skills of what it means to be a journalist, should be able to report on any topic, right? You do your research, you interview the best and the brightest. I took restaurant reviews not to be me as much as a critic sharing my opinion, but rather to simply be reporting on my experience, right? Now, that didn't mean that I didn't say a lot of really stupid things, because I was not a trained chef. And over the year, and that's why you start at a small alt weekly, right? Or you start with your own food blog, because you do make stupid mistakes. For years, I kept the Robuchon book, his big, super thick Joël Robuchon book, and The Joy of Cooking, like on my desk while I wrote. So before I would say something like about what I thought was wrong with the sauce, I would look it up and make sure that I knew what it was supposed to be. You know, so to me, that's just, basic journalism. If you're going to report, you don't have to be an expert in the field. You have to be an expert of speaking to the people who are experts in the field, and you have to be honest, and you have to be fair, and you have to do your research. So I'd say probably the first 5 or 10 years, it would have been fair for anybody to say that I was totally unqualified to write about food, but somebody has to do it, and why not? After 25 almost years of doing it, and I always love to interview the best of the best, I try to write a lot more than critiques. I try to write stories. I try to teach people about caviar, right? And explain to them the vocabulary, and explain to them the history, and explain to them where things are endangered, right? So that's the way that I approach food writing. So that means you call the foremost experts in the world and you interview them and you ask them things. Well, I mean, I try not to be too immodest, but I dare say that after 20 plus years of calling the best of the best and asking them to explain things to you, yeah, I picked up a little bit along the way, and I may know more about dry aging beef than a lot of chefs who serve dry aged beef, but you still don't want me to cook it. I can guarantee you that, man.
You've been in New York, you've been in Las Vegas. In your opinion, what is New York versus the Las Vegas food scene?
I mean, New York City is just, to me, New York City will always remain the greatest city on earth. I mean, the objectively greatest city on earth. But so it's going to have the best of the best restaurants. It's going to have fantastic things everywhere that you look. But what drew me to Las Vegas, because I was like so many other people, I'm going to come here for 3 years. I'm going to have a party, and then I'm going to move back. Or they're going to run me out of town on a rail, because I'm going to get in trouble. And then I'll go back to New York. I fell in love, and the food has a lot to do with this, but I fell in love with Las Vegas early on because I saw it as a city in its adolescence, a city that was still becoming what it was going to be for the long term. New York is New York. It's very eternal. It's very regal in that way. You go there and you feel like you're part of history. In Las Vegas, you feel like you're creating its history. And for that reason, the chefs in New York are all chefs at the top of their game, no matter what they are. Chefs in Las Vegas take bigger chances. They were still trying to figure out what neighborhoods would work off the Strip. They were still trying to figure out what concepts would work off the Strip, and they were all supporting each other in this amazing way that you never saw in New York, which was a cutthroat industry, right? So when I transitioned to writing primarily about food, it was not because I wanted to be a food writer. It was because I wanted to write about the chefs in Las Vegas. I wanted to be one of the people documenting what I saw as an amazing time frame in the Las Vegas culinary scene. I loved the way these chefs supported each other. I loved the way these chefs were trying to create something new. I loved the way they were building up neighborhoods from the ground up, from scratch. And I wanted to tell their stories. I thought it would be a privilege that they would trust me to tell their stories. But that's all about this city and its adolescence that I fell in love with, and New York holds no attraction for me anymore, right? Because I can still go back and I can still see all the things that I used to love, but they're not my New York. But the things I've watched grow in Las Vegas that I've almost been a part of, I don't want to take the credit for them, but I've been a witness to them. I've helped shine the spotlight on a few of them. These are now the people who are making the decisions in this town. These are the people who are the movers and the shakers. And to have been the guy who told their stories first is just a privilege that I wouldn't trade that for any other thing. Hanging out with rock stars is great. Hanging out, I've covered politicians. I've interviewed very, very important people in all kinds of fields. But to tell the story of a culinary scene at that point, and to be one of the key figures documenting it, was just something that spoke to me.
You've almost teed up the next question I was going to ask you, like you knew it was coming. But in your opinion, how innovative is the food scene here in Las Vegas?
I think that the food scene in Las Vegas is innovative from the point of view of there are a lot of people taking chances. There are a lot of people experimenting on new neighborhoods that they wouldn't have experimented with. There are a lot of people challenging the preconceived notions of what will work in the suburbs, what will work on the Strip, what will work as a grab and go, which we never thought would have worked as a grab and go, but suddenly people trying it out. So we're innovative in that way. Now, we are also a place that loves success, right? And so we may not be where so this isn't going to be the first place that you see dry aged fish, right? Like, people are going to work out something like that in other cities, and it's going to make its way to Las Vegas. But when those ideas do get here, people take them and they run with them. So I would say, yeah, I think that we are innovative on the practical sense. These chefs are being very innovative in how to make these businesses work. And then there are a few that are super innovative with creativity. I covered a time when all these chefs were starting to make their own charcuterie, right? And doing it in computer rooms at their Strip restaurants. And I almost got a chef closed down by the health department because I was writing articles about the fact he was doing that, which technically you weren't supposed to do. But then that helped them establish health department regulations for how to make charcuterie, right? So in that way, I do see a lot of innovative chefs who do want to push the envelope of what can be done. But I think the real innovation is pushing the marketplace.
How difficult, Al, is it for you then to be completely honest with your reviews, so people that are reading them or listening to them go, okay, he didn't like this? How difficult is that for you when you know the chef or you know the people there, but it's not something you really cared for?
Yeah. After this amount of time, I think people know me and they know a couple things about me. Is I try not to take joy in the insult when I put something down, because that strikes me as petty and somebody who's more interested in the cheap laugh, So they know that I don't do that. That I don't revel in saying this was horrible and you should never go here and making these great jokes about it. I don't do that. And I also know very well the difference between when I say this is not to my personal taste, but it's executed very well, but I would never order it again, but you should. So nobody really objects to that, even if they're my friend. And when I go, yo, man, they were off today. The yolk was supposed to be runny and the yolk was hard on this egg. Well, they can't argue with that because I'm coming at it with a fact, right? So that's not hard for me. Now, if I was one of these people that wanted to go for the cheap laughs and I really wanted to, get all the, because writing nasty gets you so many more likes, right? We all know that. And if I was somebody who reveled in that, I think it would be a lot harder for me to still have the friendship of some of these chefs and at least the respect of those who don't consider me a friend. But I like to think that I've earned that respect by being honest, by explaining what it is that I don't like, and by not looking like I'm getting a kick out of being nasty to them.
Listeners, I told you at the beginning of the show that I'm a fan of his podcast, the Food and Loathing podcast. I'm going to put a link in the show notes where you can get directly linked to that and start subscribing and listening to it. You can get the lowdown on what's new and what's hot. Al, how long have you been doing the show?
I started that right after I left the Las Vegas Review Journal, and I left the Review Journal primarily to start the Neon Feast app. I had been at the Review Journal for about 4.5 years. It came at an interesting point in my life. It came at a point in my life after I had just quit drinking, and my Las Vegas lifestyle was not quite as wild as it was, because I don't know if I would have lasted at the Review Journal back in the pre-days. I was very blessed to be there during COVID because, again, I was privileged to tell the stories of people who were really suffering. And I thought it was good that I worked at a newspaper that was landing on the governor's desk. And I knew that his office read the Las Vegas Review Journal. So when he changed occupancy from 25 to 35 or whatever it was, I called up the restaurateurs and I said, what would you say to the governor about this? What would you say is happening in your restaurant as this? And I knew I had the chance to give them a voice. So I was very happy, even though the RJ was a little stuffy of a place for me. I mean, they're wonderful people and it was an honor to work with them, but not exactly the job where you picture me. But being there during COVID was so amazing. But I knew I wanted to do something more. So to answer your question, I left because I was going to start the Neon Feast restaurant guide. And I knew that being an entrepreneur for the first time, man, I'm going to spend all my time worried about marketing and hiring people and doing this and none of the fun, right? So I said, I'm going to keep my language clean here on your show.
No,
not
you don't
like
have
my
to.
podcast. My podcast is like a drinking game when I curse.
No, you don't have to. It's fine.
Okay. So basically I figured, fuck it. I'm going to start a podcast where it's not that. It's just me getting together with friends and talking about food for an hour every week. And, we're not going to be there to trash places. It's not what we do, but we're going to have the conversations that we used to have. So I started that. I swear I haven't looked at how many people download my podcast in a year and a half. I don't want to know. I don't want to know that some weeks do better than others. I don't want to know why they do it. It's the only thing in my life that I do where I'm not looking at metrics and analytics all day long, right, every day, now that I'm an entrepreneur. So the podcast is so much the passion project for me. It is so much just like, my wife listens to it every week and says, this is like what the conversations you have with our chef friends are like when you don't have a microphone on. And I said, good, that's the highest compliment you could give me because that's what I want it to be about.
It's a very fun podcast to listen to, as you just said. I love that you don't care about your language on your show. You guys just let it rip from the belt, so to speak. But you and I are sitting here on the patio of Dom DeMarco's, and you record your show here as well. I have said it many times that this patio is beautiful. This food, this place is so good that people have to come here. But they hear it from me all the time. And now that you're here, what's your opinion here of Dom DeMarco's?
Look, I love Dom DeMarco's. It really interesting. When I started my app, Neon Feast, restaurants don't end up on our lists like of best pizza or a best Italian, etc., unless I send out a survey to a lot of people whose opinions I trust, and I see them come back on multiple surveys. So I was not surprised when Dom DeMarco's came back in people's top pizza thing. I've loved this place since it opened. I'm here for the Sicilian. I mean, I will say their Brooklyn is great. It's straight up round, but I love their Sicilian. Only a couple people here in Las Vegas do a good Sicilian. There are 2 or 3 others I could mention, but this one's the closest to my house of all of them. So, I've been a sucker for this place since it opened its doors. The first time I was here on this patio, Chef Vinny Rotolo, who now owns Good Pie in the Arts District, was a manager here, and he came over and brought me out back to this patio and was showing me all of the ovens and what it was like. And, so I go way back with this place. So it was on our pizza list, and suddenly I sent out a survey, I don't know, maybe about 9 months ago, a year ago, because I send them out about 3-4 times a year. And at the time, it was a springtime survey, best places to dine outside, best al fresco dining. And my friend Mitch Schneider, another local writer, was one of the first to mention Dom DeMarco's in that category. And then a few other people did. So we moved it over. It's still on our top pizza spots, and it is now also on our best alfresco dining list. So, this patio is key. And, Albert Scaliat here has been so cool. He's like, whenever you need a place, if you don't have a place to record, just come on. So what usually happens is Tuesday rolls around, we don't have a place to record on Wednesday. I send him a text. I'm like, hey, man, can we still use your patio? He says, yeah, come on in. He brings out the food, and we have a great time.
The Neon Feast app, which solves where to eat with filters and categories. How long did it take you to create this?
I mean, the idea for the Neon Feast app probably took 6, 7, 8 years before it became a reality, but it was brought to me in a very different form, like sort of in a form of, hey, why don't we create this, and it'll have 5,000 restaurants, every restaurant in Las Vegas, and and I didn't like that idea. I wanted it to be more curated, and I bounced ideas around. Then I tried to figure out a business plan that would make it work and pay for it, because it ain't cheap to build an app and a website.
Right.
And then I had to raise a little bit of money, and then I had to quit the review journal because I couldn't technically raise the money. So I had to make sure I knew where the money was, and that I kind of had rough conversations with people, and a lot of it came from friends and family, so that was pretty easy, to just feel it out. And then, so once I left the review journal, we started the podcast 2 weeks to that day. Our first podcast was the opening day. It was recorded at the opening of Resorts World, right?
Okay.
So 2 weeks, we got the podcast going, and then it took me about 9 months to launch, to physically build the app, the Neon Feast app and website. And of course, I didn't build it. I hired people to build it. But yeah, so I left the RJ probably in June, and by February, the end of February of the next year, we had launched Neon Feast. But of course, it's a constantly evolving app. I'm always sending out surveys. I'm always hiring writers to help me write it and keep it up there and promote it and all that. Growing it really slowly, but we're up to about between 30 and 35,000 unique users a month coming here, and about 70,000 plus visits a month. So, I'd love to think that 70,000 people a month are finding a place to eat at Neon Feast,
Yeah, you got to love that. Listeners, if you don't, just go download it. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Please do me a favor and Al a favor and download the Neon Feast app.
Please.
But Al, do me and my listeners a favor, since I have them coming. I have local listeners and people that travel here. Give them maybe a hot spot on the Strip and maybe a hot spot for our locals.
Hot spots on the Strip right now. I think everybody's looking to do new types of Mediterranean dining, because that light dining is really on. So we've had a couple really big ones open within the past year, and I like them all for really different reasons. So I'll go there.
Sure.
And none of these, by the way, are on Neon Feast because they're all brand new. One of them just got added. So I'm giving you a little advance there. I would say Hassalan. In Venetian Palazzo, and that's an Israeli kind of Mediterranean. Look, if you're an old man like me, you go early, because as much as I used to hang out on stage at rock concerts all day and all night, the party there gets to where you can't hear yourself think. After about 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock, they're dancing on tables. They're picking up chairs over their heads. It's like a Tel Aviv wedding, but the food itself is super light, super ingredient driven, very simple. Again, Israeli Mediterranean. LPM in the Cosmopolitan, being an Italian-French, elevated, fancy, snooty Mediterranean. They do that fantastically well. I love that. And then Michael Mina just opened what he's calling a Greek Mediterranean, but it's Greek Mediterranean via Egypt, because he was born in Egypt. And it's a lot of the dishes that he grew up with. And that's called Orla by Michael Mina in Mandalay Bay. Okay. So new stuff, those things are hot right now, right? Those are all open within the last year, and I love them. Off the Strip, I'm going to go back to a couple classics for you. You're never going to go wrong with Sparrow and Wolf, right?
No.
If you want adventuresome dining, Sparrow and Wolf. Just one of the best pioneering off-strip restaurants, and dishes that you will not find on a menu anywhere else, because they have that level of creativity. They're not a dish you've had someplace else. Now, on the flip side, James Trees. He does a couple Italian restaurants that are a lot more approachable than something like I said with Brian Howard at Sparrow and Wolf. So James Trees, if you want that hearty Italian food, either go to Osolito Posto or you go to Esther's Kitchen, which is now expanding in the Arts District. So those places are fantastic. He has other restaurants that are more experimental that I like as well, but I'm giving you the ones that are mainstream. So I think you always want to hit James Trees. You want to hit Brian Howard. You want to hit Partage. You always want to keep that place in your mind. If you're thinking of spending $500 a head at Robuchon and you just can't justify it, then you think about going to a Partage where, you get a $150 tasting menu in Chinatown, French, fine dining, elevated almost to that same level of the Robuchons and the Guy Savoys and all of that at an off-strip price. So those places are not new. I don't know if they're hot and of the moment right now, but man, I would never forget them. And again, we got a lot of great pizza places, man. Yeah. Hit Good Pie, hit Evil Pie, hit Dom DeMarco's. Where else? Manzu Italian Oven does not get enough attention. Check out Manzu Italian Oven. On Flamingo Road. And that's, of course, the brother of the family that does Nora's Italian cuisine.
Oh, wow.
So Giovanni Morrow was raised in Nora's. Actually, he was born in Sicily. He was raised at Nora's. And, he runs Manzu Italian Oven. And, God, that just has some of the most creative and authentic Sicilian dishes that you won't find anywhere else, or just great Roman-style pizza, which was just on Barstool Sports. It got a great review.
It did. How different is the restaurants from off-strip to on-strip? Outside of price, is there much difference between restaurants on the strip versus off?
Price is drastically different, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. On-strip restaurants are almost obligated to have some level of wow factor that you're going to pay through the nose for. And it may not necessarily affect the quality of your meal. It's aimed at being a tourist, right? And if you are a tourist, there's no substitute for a lot of that stuff, right? To have gold leaf sprinkled on your food and, everything. But that all elevates the pricing. Off strip, I think there's just a much more focus on what the food is and quality service. They're not very few people off the strip are looking for you to necessarily, they don't want to give you a crazy bottle service presentation with a waitress in bikini, and, they don't want smoke to pop up out of a box when they're handing you a cheeseburger. And on the strip, we do want that. We want all that craziness, all that bells and whistles. So to me, that's it. The celebrity factor is very big on the strip. The bells and whistle factor, the Instagrammable moment means so much more when you're on the strip. I would say, we might have how should I put this? Think about the Golden Knights.
Okay.
Compare the Golden Knights to going out to California and watching like a Ducks game. It's not the same thing, right?
Right.
Because it's on the strip. Because when you bring a hockey game to the strip, you have to blow it up with this ridiculous show that fans from other places sort of make fun of, right? But we love it because we're in Vegas. If you want to have a successful restaurant on the strip, there's that same showmanship aspect. It has to be a showmanship. People are going home and they're going to talk about every minute of every decision they made in Las Vegas, and you've got to give them something crazy that happened in your restaurant, right? And I feel that that's that's both the cool part and also the roll your eyes and don't want to pay for it after a while part of dining on the strip.
What does it mean to you to be part of this food and beverage community here in Las Vegas as a journalist?
It's one of the great honors in my life that these people trust me to tell their stories, and that they trust me they trust me enough, and they've seen the way that I've covered the typical stories, the fun stories, the grand opening stories, the who's cooking with this stories, who's using black garlic stories, whatever. They've seen how I've handled those stories, and then they trust me that when they have to close their restaurants, they'll call me 2 weeks in advance so that we can schedule the announcement to go out when I was, say, at the Review Journal, so that nobody would hear it from us first, but that the story would go out at the exact moment that they were getting handed the news from their boss at a meeting. So they trust me to treat those stories with the respect that I have for the community. I don't want anybody's kid learning that their dad lost a job from me, right? So they trust me with that. When they go through addiction and recovery problems, when we talk about mental health issues, we talk about the suicide problems in Las Vegas restaurants, they trust me to be honest with that. I love these people. I truly do. I'm not arrogant enough to call myself part of their world because I don't sweat it out on the line with them every night, but they let me into it and they let me take a look at it and they let me tell their stories. Sometimes those aren't easy stories to tell. And I'm just incredibly honored that I have that level of trust from them.
Do you find yourself at events or at restaurants looking around going, what in the hell am I doing here? Like pinch yourself moments?
A lot of what first of all, yeah, you do it, right? But I mean, I look at the things I've done in my life and there's always, I told you that I started writing about I started exploring, not even writing, exploring fine dining just because I didn't like the fact that there were people I knew who were aware of it and I wasn't aware of it. So I wanted to know about it. I think I've always wanted to be the guy who was close to anything cool that happened. I loved rock and roll, so I wanted to be standing on stage at Woodstock 99. I was, right? Okay. I loved, and I love being backstage with these people. And I love the finest things in life, just like everybody else does. But when I see a ridiculous suite or something on TV, I'm like, oh yeah, and I gotta hang in that. And by being in Las Vegas, I have seen and tasted and experienced and touched things that most people never get to see in their life. Solid gold this and, ridiculousness of that and a sky high suites and killer views. And yeah, man, it is a world that, I don't have a lot of money, but why do I need a lot of money? I do the things that billionaires become billionaires just so they can experience these things. And I experience them every day, man. It's pretty damn cool. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
Is it true you're not a fan of steak?
I eat maybe 3 or 4 steaks a year.
Okay.
And if I eat a steak, I want to know a lot about it. I want to know, how it's aged, how it was raised, what the family genealogy is on it. My wife's a big steak eater. She could eat a New York strip from, any place in town and be happy with it, but it's not my big thing. But if you do take me out to steak, for a guy who says he's not big on steak, I'll be the most obnoxious guy at the table because I will ask every question. And if they tell me that it's Kobe beef, I'm going to ask to see the birth certificate and the nose print. I mean, I'm that kind of guy when I eat steak. I mean, I'm an asshole basically. But because it's such a rarity for me that I sit down and eat a piece of an actual steak. Yeah, I want it to be the best of the best when I do.
When I was putting together some notes for this show and just kind of looking through some things and thinking over things on the strip, one name that popped to mind is Guy Fieri. Mm-hmm. And some people say his food is either great or it's way over the top. What is it in your opinion?
I think Guy Fieri does a very, very good job of reaching his audience, which is massive.
Yes.
And reaching them where they want to be in a restaurant. Now, I am not his audience. I mean, and by the way, I have mad respect. I tried to do a show similar to his, and I recorded 10 episodes, never aired. A lot of craziness went on with that. But one thing that you learn when you're signed to do a TV show is how hard it is to do something like Guy Fieri does. So I have nothing but respect for him and how he's managed to build this audience of Flavor Town, right? But I'm not a citizen of Flavor Town, right? Like I'm not the guy who wants giant sauces and cheese on cheese and do that. But he knows who his audience is, and he gives them high quality food that meets those expectations. I just don't want to order that food very often, right?
Gotcha.
So if I'm in the mood for that, give me this, pile more on, blah, blah. Hell yeah, I want to eat Guy Fieri's food. He does it really, really well, but that's not the sweet spot for me.
You said you stopped drinking, but prior to that, did you ever taste his Santo tequila?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I don't drink anymore, but I still sip spirits for my job so that I know what they taste like and things like that.
What is that like?
I mean, yeah, Santo's a weird spirit because it's kind of like meant to combine mezcal and tequila sort of together. And I don't know why anybody would do that except to make it more approachable for people that don't really like mezcal, but they want something new. And look, in the celebrity spirits brand, that's usually the key, right? How do you get people to drink something that they don't already drink because it has a celebrity's name on it? And the answer is usually you dumb it down, right? So, and I say this with respect for some of those brands. I love Sammy Hagar's brand, for example, Cabo Wabo. I mean, it was better at the time than you were finding anywhere else, right? So, but would I drink Santos at home? No. Would I recommend putting it into a cocktail that maybe calls for mezcal or tequila, but you want to make it a little different? Absolutely, I'd use it in a cocktail, but I don't sip it unless, well, again, I don't really drink, but unless Guy's sitting in front of me or Sammy's sitting in front of me, in which case I'll sip it with them, and it's fine enough. I don't have to try hard to sip it with them. It doesn't bother me. But as a guy who doesn't drink, and who, if I am going to order something, it's going to be something really, really high end, that would not be the Mexican spirit that I would order.
Gotcha. Have you ever visited or tried the chef food truck that was Chef, Roy Choi?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, man, before Golden Knights games, that is one of the best places to go for a quickie. I mean, okay. My key go-to, if I have the time and the money and I want to be formal before a Golden Knights game, by the way, if anybody wants to tip, you go into to Bavette's Steakhouse and order their duck and goat cheese terrine. It's just fantastic. Eat it at the bar. That's pregame. But when I can't get in there, I go over to the chef truck, man, and I get one of those Cuban sandwiches that they do, and it's fantastic, man. I love it. Yeah.
So here's my personal question to you. I'm a pescatarian. So where would Al send me to go try?
Well, I mean, if you really want to dig into seafood, I mean, I think we got some great seafood restaurants. Michael Mina, his namesake restaurant in Bellagio, is just, for high-end, super high-end seafood. If you're looking for, also off the strip. I mean, you want to be on the strip or off the strip?
Off the strip.
Off the strip. Okay, so if you want to go seafood, definitely hit the Legends Oyster Bar on the west side or Other Mama on the west side. Oh. Both of them fantastic. Other Mama just expanded and added a lounge, Stan Cromer's restaurant. They're both over, not too far from where we're sitting right now, both on Durango Drive, right around Desert Breeze Park.
Okay.
So I'd send you to both of those.
Perfect.
If you want to go the vegetarian, side of things, I would tell you, go to the Strip and go to Crossroads Kitchen by Tal Ronan.
Man, I've heard about this place a few times now. People have told me about Crossroads.
Crossroads Kitchen's a great restaurant, and Tal Ronan's celebrity chef to the vegan stars, right? And he does cool stuff in there, so I really like that. But yeah, it depends what you're in the mood for, I mean, there's a lot of vegan-friendly restaurants or plant-based. Just about everybody has good plant-based and seafood items these days. They do. I mean, it's really hard when people say, where would you send me? Oh, I just want one restaurant. I'm like, tell me more about you. Like, where, right. How much do you want to spend? What are you going on a date night? You going with a bunch of your drunk buddies? I mean, there's a lot of differences in there. But I mean, I'd say, if you are a seafood eater though, and you want to be off the strip, you have to hit both of those restaurants, both Other Mama and with Legends Oyster Bar. They're both fantastic.
I got a couple new places to try, so I appreciate that.
Cool.
Listeners, make sure that you get subscribed to the Food and Loathing podcast and download the Neon Feast app. I'll put links, both of those, in the show notes. Al, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy and coming on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for your time, man. It was a blast.
Yeah, it was been fun. Listeners, do me a favor. This takes you 30 seconds, if that. I need you to hit 5 stars. So you rate the show, which helps me grow the show, and then give me some nice comments. It'll like 2 words, maybe 3. I don't really care. Just rate and review the show. It'll help me grow it. That's going to do it for this episode of Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, a salute, a chin chin.